Westdale United Church. It's an honor to be with you tonight. I think perhaps everyone gathered here tonight has someone very dear to them in their minds, in their hearts. You have carried them with you tonight. My Uncle Clarence was 49 years old when he was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. 49. Younger than I am now. Aunt Rose called it the thief that came in the night. But she said it would never steal her love for Clarence. Nothing in heaven or on earth could. I saw what her love could do, the strength of love, and with the help available to her and Clarence, what a strength community support could be. Whatever or whoever has brought you here tonight, you are where you are supposed to be. And we have gathered to hear the wisdom of one who you need to meet. When I met Talia in November at All Saints Church, I left hoping that she could speak to us here at Westdale. And so I emailed her and I asked her, I thank you, Talia, for being so gracious and kind, and for the amazing and important work that you do. A huge Westdale welcome to you. Talia is the Community Engagement Coordinator for the Alzheimer's Society of Peterborough, Kawartha Lakes, Northumberland, and Halliburton. Big area. And she has been working for the Alzheimer's Society for 3 years and strives to reduce dementia-related stigma by using public education to promote inclusivity and compassion towards people living with dementia and their care partners as they navigate their communities. Talia participates in several community networks that work towards providing holistic social supports to local senior citizens, including the Basic Needs Working Group with Age Friendly Peterborough, the Halliburton Community Service Providers Network, and the City of Peterborough Accessibility Advisory Committee, Built Environment Subcommittee. Her work is very important. It is making a difference. And we are so very pleased to have Talia here tonight. And Talia is very pleased to be here with us tonight and to chat about dementia and how your community can support members who may be living with dementia or supporting a person living with dementia. So please join with me in welcoming Talia to Westdale United Church.
I'm going to try to talk very loudly and clearly, so please let me know if you need the volume up or down at any time, because sometimes, believe it or not, I can get a little loud. Thank you so much for that amazing introduction and for welcoming me here tonight. I'm very excited to chat with you, and I hope that you'll be able to walk away tonight feeling confident in your ability to support people in your personal lives or in the congregation or members of your communities who may be living with dementia. Chris, your story was very poignant because I often get asked, Talia, isn't your job sad? You must face a lot of sadness. And it's very true. But I often like to say that I have the privilege of seeing a type of love that is so amazing and so powerful. I'm getting the chills right now because many people see it maybe once in their life, or they, their parents or their grandparents. But I get to see it every day, that love between people who have committed to care and love for one another. So I feel very blessed and privileged with that regard. So today, we're going to be talking about how we can build a dementia-friendly community right here at Westdale, or continue to build a dementia-friendly community. So what is a dementia-friendly community, you may ask? Well, a dementia-friendly community is a place that is welcoming, inclusive, and supportive. So it's a place that thinks about the social and physical needs of people living with dementia and their care partners. So like I said, I really hope that we leave today feeling confident and inspired to create a dementia-friendly community right here. And I would like to just say, if you have any questions throughout that you feel like, okay, I might lose it if I don't ask it right now, please feel comfortable raising your hand or asking the question. I like to have kind of an informal presentation style, even though this is sort of a very formal presentation style. I want you to be able to feel relaxed and as if this is a conversation, because that's how we're really going to learn. So if you have a question or a compliment, please feel free, just shout it out. And I may start practicing my comedy routine as well. I've been known to go rogue with a couple of jokes, so pity laughs are appreciated as well. That was great. Thank you. Okay, I like to get that out of the way. So thank you very much. Now, why is this topic important? Why has Chris brought this zesty gal with big curly hair in front of you tonight? As many of us may know, dementia is affecting Canadians at a very high rate. So actually right now there are 600,000 Canadians who are living with some form of dementia. Now that statistic is interesting because those are Canadians who are living with an official diagnosis. But as we know, there can be many barriers to accessing a diagnosis. So we feel that this statistic actually underrepresents the reality of how many Canadians are currently living with a diagnosis. Some of these barriers can include barriers to accessing medical care. So if you live in a rural community, sometimes it can be difficult to access medical care quickly. There's also a stigma related to dementia, which oftentimes is a barrier for people in accessing healthcare. And that number is actually projected to rise. So by 2050, it's projected that 1.7 million Canadians will be living with a diagnosis. Now, this does make sense because our population is aging. And age is one of the greatest risk factors for developing dementia. Now, that's not to say if you experience aging, you will automatically develop dementia, but it is a risk factor. So if we see population numbers growing in a certain age demographic, we will see the number of cases of dementia growing as well. 1 in 5 Canadians are currently experiencing being a care partner for someone living with dementia. And this statistic always kind of strikes me because being a care partner can often feel very isolating. And one can feel that they're on a journey sort of alone. However, when we look at this, it's really 1 in every sort of family or friend group. So the level of people who are care partners is very prevalent across Canada. So we have to remember, how can we support a care partner as well? How can we support someone we know is facing some challenges in their personal life? And this last statistic, it makes me sad, but it's why I do the work that I do and why this anti-stigma work is so important. So 46% of Canadians polled admitted that they would feel ashamed or embarrassed if they had a diagnosis of dementia. I feel that this is directly related to the stigma associated with dementia. And it's okay to feel afraid of getting a diagnosis or to feel the effects of stigma, but we really want to work to break down that stigma so that people can feel like if they receive a diagnosis, they will be supported by their community and that there are medical and social supports in place so that they can live well. So that's what kind of gets me going during my work days, is feeling like I can help to reduce that statistic right there. Now, to get a good sense of the impact that dementia has in our direct community, it's helpful to look at local statistics. So up here on the screen, you'll see the 4 counties that our local Alzheimer's Society serves, and we have Peterborough County highlighted. So in 2023, our community, Peterborough County, had approximately 4,000 individuals living with dementia. And by 2036, it's projected that we will have approximately 6,364 people. Now, as we discussed before, many of these statistics underrepresent the actual numbers of people living with dementia because they just reflect who has gotten an official diagnosis. And we have to take into consideration all the care partners as well, who are going to be supporting these people who are living with dementia. So really, the number of people in our community right here who are directly impacted by dementia could be upwards of 20,000. Peterborough County as well has one of the highest rates of senior citizens per capita. So according to StatsCan 2021, senior citizens made up 25.2% of Peterborough County's total population. And that's in comparison to 19% being the national average. So if we see that our population has larger numbers of senior citizens, we will see that we're going to have larger numbers of people who are living with dementia. So that's why it's important, not only in Canada, not only in the world, but right here in our community, that we develop skills and our knowledge to be able to support people who are living with dementia right here in our community. Now, a question that I get asked very frequently is, what is the difference between dementia and Alzheimer's disease? Did anyone in the room have this question tonight? Okay, I see a couple of hands. Rest assured, I will answer it for you, but I must warn you, it may get a little muddy before it gets clear, so just bear with me. So, as you see on the screen, dementia is actually an umbrella term. So what does this mean? It's not a disease in itself. Rather, it's a way to describe a set of diseases or conditions of the brain that can cause symptoms such as memory loss. So who's confused? Yes, I can totally understand that. So dementia it's a way to describe memory loss, but it's not the disease in itself. I like to use the analogy of shortness of breath. So if I have shortness of breath, is that a disease? No, it's a symptom, it's an experience, right? But we all know what that means. So if you think of dementia kind of like shortness of breath, it's a symptom, and there's many causes. So somebody who has shortness of breath may have a cardiovascular condition. They may have anxiety. They may be experiencing an allergy, or they may have asthma. There's several different conditions that can cause that experience of shortness of breath. So dementia is the same. It's a set of symptoms, including memory loss, that can be caused by many different conditions. One of those conditions is Alzheimer's disease, but scientists have actually found up to 100 forms of dementia. And we won't go over them all this evening, don't worry. But we are going to talk about the 4 most common forms of dementia. So we're going to start tonight with Alzheimer's disease. And this is the most commonly diagnosed form of dementia. So it accounts for about 60 to 80% of all diagnoses. Now with Alzheimer's disease, changes in the brain begin in the hippocampus. Does anyone know what our hippocampus is in charge of? What does it do? Memory? Yeah, so our hippocampus is in charge of making and storing new memories. So that's why we see with Alzheimer's disease, one of the hallmark symptoms, or one of the first and kind of most common symptoms, is changes in one's short-term memory. And as the disease progresses throughout the brain, we see other symptoms onset as well. Our next most commonly diagnosed form of dementia is vascular dementia. Now, vascular dementia occurs when there is impaired blood flow to the brain. So can anyone think of an instance where there may be impaired blood flow to the brain? Stroke, exactly. So I always like to say, just because someone has a stroke does not mean that they will automatically develop dementia, but it becomes a risk factor. So when an individual has a stroke, there is impaired blood flow to the brain. And that means that there is depleted oxygen levels. So that can impact the cells of the brain. With a stroke, we often see that where the stroke has happened in the brain will dictate what sort of symptoms we begin to see. So unlike Alzheimer's disease, which has the hallmark symptom of changes in short-term memory, vascular dementia can look very different across different people. Next is a more rarely diagnosed form of dementia, and that's Lewy body dementia. This accounts for about 5 to 15% of all diagnoses. And Lewy body dementia has similar symptoms to Alzheimer's disease as well as Parkinson's disease. So we may see that stooped posture, muscle tremors, a shuffling gait, but we also see changes in memory, difficulties with language and cognition. And with Lewy body dementia, one of the most common symptoms is auditory and visual hallucinations. So it may be seeing or hearing things that aren't necessarily there. So that can help someone to distinguish what form of dementia it is if they go to a healthcare provider. And lastly, we have frontotemporal dementia, which affects, it's actually another umbrella term that impacts 2 lobes of the brain. Can anyone guess which lobes of the brain? Frontal and temporal, exactly. So frontotemporal dementia, although it only accounts for about 2 to 5% of all diagnoses, there is a correlation with young onset dementia or early onset. So people who are diagnosed with dementia prior to the age of 65 account for 20% of all diagnoses of frontotemporal. So there is a correlation between frontotemporal and early onset, but we haven't quite figured out why yet. With frontotemporal, we see symptoms related to moods, behavior, personality, language. So oftentimes we see what we call responsive behaviors. So somebody may be acting in a way that doesn't necessarily reflect what's going on in the environment. But that's because the area of their brain that's in charge of their behavior and moods has become impaired. Now, to further complicate things, there are some other factors to consider as well. So there are some other health conditions that can cause symptoms related to changes in cognition. But some of these factors can be treated and functioning can be regained. But some of these factors might also be at play with the diagnosis of a form of dementia like Alzheimer's disease. So it can actually be a little bit difficult to get an accurate diagnosis. For example, a deep depression or kind of a long episode of depression can have symptoms similar to dementia. So changes in mood, changes in memory and cognition can actually happen as a result of a prolonged period of depression. The side effects of medication can very much impact one's memory. So I've had many people express to me that medication that they were taking for cancer had a large impact on their cognition and their memory. Sometimes the interactions between medications, taking too much, taking too little, can impact our cognitive function. But let's say we go to a healthcare provider and that's kind of the issue. They can do a medication review and hopefully functioning can be regained. A vision or hearing impairment, if left untreated, can also cause some disorientation as well as challenges with communication. So we always suggest if you wear glasses or have hearing aids, you always want to try to use those tools. Nutritional deficiencies can also cause changes in our memory. So for example, vitamin B12 has been known, if you're sort of deficient for a long period, can impact your cognitive function. Infection and delirium. So oftentimes we see in the population of senior citizens UTIs, or urinary tract infections. Now, if these go left untreated, or an infection gets left untreated, the body's reaction to that infection can be something called delirium. Delirium is a very acute, kind of quick onset, dementia-like state. So someone may know their name and the date one day, and then the next day they're very disoriented, and they may be seeing or hearing things that aren't there. But that's one's body's reaction to an untreated infection. So if we ever see kind of that really sharp change in someone's cognition, we oftentimes will try to make sure that there's not an infection going on. Metabolic disorders, diabetes, thyroid conditions, liver disease can also cause symptoms that are similar to dementia, so changes in our cognition. Now I know everyone can relate to me when you have one bad night of sleep and you have that, that presentation the next day and you gotta be happy, 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 but you don't feel happy, happy, happy because you got a bad sleep for one night. So you can appreciate if you have a sleep disorder, like insomnia or sleep apnea, and you're sort of consistently not getting quality sleep, I'm sure you can appreciate how that would change your mood and your function, right? And it can even have impairments on your cognition. And lastly, trauma. So something like a head injury or a tumor, these sorts of things can also impact our cognitive function. So these can be standalone reasons for changes in cognition, but they can also be in conjunction with a progressive form of dementia, like Alzheimer's disease. Does anyone have any questions? I know that's a lot of information all at once. Don't be shy.
I've got several, but I gotta think about them.
Okay, understood. Don't worry, at the end we'll have a nice Q&A session as well. So changing gears here a little bit, I'll give your brains a break because I know that's been a lot of information at you. If you saw this fine young man at the doors of Westdale today, at the front doors, how might you interact with this person? What might you do? Can I help you? You would open the door. What else?
Make yourself known to him.
Yeah, introduce yourself. Yep. What else?
Did he ask him what happened?
Yeah, you could ask what happened. What else? Invite him in. Exactly. And we'll go to the next slide. Now we'll come back to our friend. But I want you to look at the screen here and show me the differences. What differences do you see between the image on the left and the image on the right? Holes.
There's one on each side is a healthy brain.
Mm-hmm.
This is smaller disease.
Mm-hmm.
Shrinkage.
Shrinkage, yep. So the brain on the left is an adult brain without Alzheimer's disease, so a healthy adult brain. And the brain on the right is an adult brain with Alzheimer's disease. So some of the changes or the differences that you see between those two brains are holes or enlarged ventricles. We also see that the brain mass itself has shrunk. So the medical term for that is atrophy. So the brain has experienced atrophy. We also see larger spaces in between the folds of the brain as well. And we'll go to the next image. So these are photographs of real human brains. Same thing, on the left is an adult brain without Alzheimer's disease, and on the right is an adult brain with Alzheimer's disease. So you can really see those spaces in between the folds of the brain. Now, if we think back to our friend who had crutches and had a cast, we can imagine that he has undergone some sort of physical change or has a physical impairment. And right away we had empathy for this fellow. How can we help him? How can we make his experience here smooth, and how can we be welcoming to him? Some of the suggestions were, introduce yourself, ask what happened, how can I help you? Hold the door, you could carry items. And it's all about having empathy for the person and acknowledging, I see someone else that might be going through something, so what can I do to help make his journey or his visit here easier? Somebody living with dementia, as you can see in these images, they are also undergoing physical changes in their body. We just can't necessarily see them from the outside. But they deserve that same empathy and kindness and respect as someone who may have, a cast and is using crutches. There's no difference between the two. And it's okay to say, Talia, I don't know how to communicate with someone living with dementia, or sometimes their symptoms make me a little uncomfortable. That's okay. And something that you can do that is empathetic towards someone living with dementia is you can sit in your discomfort and try to extend that welcoming hand to them. Because there is no difference between somebody who has a physical impairment and using crutches, or someone who wants to come to the service who's living with dementia. They both deserve that respect and that kindness. Now, it is true that you can't always tell just by looking at someone that they're living with dementia. And there are many different forms of dementia, but there are some common signs and symptoms that you can have kind of at the top of your mind if you're chatting with someone or you run into someone and things are feeling a little bit different, or you're not really kind of sure what's going on. There's a couple of things to keep in mind that might help you to realize, you know what, this person might be living with dementia. And I remember Talia and her amazing presentation. She was so engaging, and she taught me all about how I can be kind and welcoming and respectful. So we're gonna review kind of some signs and symptoms that somebody might be living with dementia. Now, I will say, I brought a resource today here. Some of you may have seen it. It was on the table when you came in, called the 10 Warning Signs. And I caution you, though, that it's not a diagnostic tool. So I know that many of us have sort of fears, natural fears about ourselves or our loved ones. And so that document is there just to kind of review, give you an idea of maybe what some common signs and symptoms are. And the idea is that if you're feeling concerned, chat with a healthcare provider or chat with someone. But I know I'm sort of an anxious person. So if I saw that, I know that I would sort of self-diagnose. So I just caution you around self-diagnosing, but it's just a way to either, just do an inventory for yourself, but also to recognize if you're chatting with someone that, they might be living with dementia. So first, we may see changes in mood and behavior. So we all have changes in mood, but usually we can identify the reason. So an example I like to use is, I know I'm so sweet and nice, I know, but if I get hungry, sometimes I get hangry. So I get angry because I'm hungry. But somebody living with dementia, their moods may change, but it's not in relation to what's happening in their environment. And that's because the area of the brain that controls that emotional regulation and behavior has become impacted. So their behavior and their moods might not necessarily reflect what's going on around them. So they may be, laughing one minute and tearful the next, or you're giving directions to the grocery store and they're laughing at it. It doesn't necessarily match, but it's because there's been changes in their brain which has impacted their ability to regulate their mood in relation to what's going on around them. Difficulties with language. So we all have times where that word is on the tip of our tongue. It's even happened when I'm presenting before. So that one always makes you kind of sweat when you're thinking it's almost there, but you just can't quite get it out. That happens to everyone. But somebody living with dementia may experience this much more frequently. You may notice someone's kind of talking around a word. So they want to say a certain word and they can't quite recall it, so they talk around it. And they try to sort of piece together something. They may misuse words without noticing, or you may see they're chatting with you, but they're not necessarily conveying a coherent message. We also see people who are multilingual. They tend to revert back to their first language as dementia progresses. So if you notice someone is sort of reverting back to their first language, that may be an indicator as well. Difficulty with abstract thinking. So numbers, sarcasm, idioms, these can all, symbols, these are all examples of abstract thinking. So somebody living with dementia may have difficulties with their bank PIN, visiting the bank, making a donation, because their brain is not able to process the more abstract things. So for example, if I were to say, it's raining cats and dogs outside, what would you think? It's pouring, which I hope not, because I've been enjoying the sunshine lately. But you would know that it's raining cats and dogs means that it's pouring outside. But somebody living with dementia may not understand the nuances of that term. So they may interpret that literally, like it's raining actual cats and dogs from the sky. So one really simple thing you can do to help someone living with dementia when you're chatting with them is just try to avoid sarcasms, analogies, idioms, and things like that. And then that will help them to process what you are saying. Difficulty performing familiar tasks. So you may notice someone who, they come up and read every week, and they know how to do it, they know how to adjust the mic, and, adjust what they're reading. And you may see some changes in their ability to do something that they may have been doing for years. And I always like to use the example of myself making a grilled cheese on Saturday morning. And I know it's hard to believe, but when I first wake up, I'm kind of like a troll. I get up and I can't really open my eyes. I'm trying to go downstairs and get something to eat. But I can basically make a grilled cheese with my eyes closed. It's easy, right? Well, to make a grilled cheese, I have to do a couple of things. Number one, I need to have the ability to do object recognition. So I need to know what a pan is and what it's used for. I need to know what a fridge is and what it's used for. I also need to understand sequencing or steps. So it's no use to me if I make a grilled cheese, but I don't turn on the burner. So I have to know what is step 1, what is step 2, what is step 3. So something that can seem so easy to us, when you break down what the brain is actually doing, it can become very difficult, especially if our brain is undergoing these changes. And misplacing things. This one usually gets people looking in their pockets for their phone or their glasses, which can have, keys, phone, keys, wallet, glasses. This is a common, occurrence. It's part of the human condition. However, somebody living with dementia may misplace things much more frequently, or we see someone living with dementia putting an item away in a place that doesn't necessarily make sense. So we may see, the watch in a sugar bowl or the glasses in the fridge. And that's because what we just chatted about, that object recognition might not be there. And this can sometimes create a bit of a challenge, because someone living with dementia, if they put an item away and they don't remember where they put it, they may start to think that their items are being stolen, or they may be kind of suspicious of where their items are going because they don't remember putting it away in that atypical place. We also may see a loss of initiative. So people living with dementia, they experience what we call apathy. Now this isn't because they don't enjoy things anymore, they don't want to engage in their hobbies, but it may be that they don't know where to start, or they don't remember that they like a hobby. So it appears as if there's a lack of motivation, but it may be because of some changes in the brain have created a barrier for them, but it doesn't have to do with actually what they want or don't want to do. So I often suggest cueing or modeling the way can help someone. So let's say you have someone that wants to volunteer here or wants to be part of the service, and you're like, okay, how do I support them? By modeling the way, so using your body to demonstrate what you're doing can be very helpful. I'll use the example of a puzzle. If you put a puzzle out on a table and you start to do the puzzle and kind of cue someone, they may very much enjoy that, but they just didn't either remember that they enjoyed puzzling or they didn't know how to start. So if we cue and model the way, that can oftentimes help to ameliorate this loss of initiative. Disorientation of time and space. So someone living with dementia may come to the right program, but at the wrong time, or they may show up at the right place, but they can't find the room. Even in familiar places, somebody living with dementia may get a little bit turned around. We often see that people living with dementia as well will refer back to their loved ones who maybe passed away as if they're still with us, or they may refer back to somewhere they used to live or their old job. And we'll touch on that a little bit later, what to do in that situation or that scenario when someone has referred back to their past. Memory problems that disrupt daily life. So we sort of chatted a little bit about that, how managing finances can be a little bit challenging, completing familiar tasks can be a bit challenging, as well as some challenges with communication. So their day-to-day life becomes a little bit more difficult. Changes in personality. So somebody living with dementia who may have been very calm, even keel, never swore their whole life, you may notice some changes in their affect. So if the area of the brain that's in charge of personality or behaviors changes, then you may see someone start to swear or sort of say uncharacteristic things, and that's because the area of their brain that's in charge of their personality has become impacted. And lastly, impaired judgment. So we may see someone living with dementia make riskier financial decisions, or we may see someone outside in the wintertime in flip-flops, or in the summertime wearing lots of clothes. And that's because their sensory processing becomes impaired. So they're not able to kind of judge, okay, the environment is cold, and therefore I use my reason, logic, and judgment to decide what to wear and put on something that is reflective of the temperature. So that's also kind of a little hint. If you're seeing someone that's dressed a little bit inappropriately for the weather, they might have just thrown on some flip-flops and got out the door, but if they're in conjunction with other symptoms, that may be a sign for you as well. So next, we're going to watch a video, and I will caution you that it is very evoking of emotion, so I just want to prepare you for that, and if you do feel emotion in the video, that's completely okay and welcome, because it's reflective of an individual who's living with dementia, moving about her community, and going about her day. So we're going to see some of those symptoms, and see how she moves through her day and what that's like.
I did that. Could you keep my... I missed. I do. It's undead neglect. Oh dear. Chicken cheese. Chicken cheese? Sorry, chicken. Oh. Oh.
I was telling Chris earlier, every time I watch the video, I do have an emotional reaction no matter how many times I watch it, because you really start to feel that empathy. What did you notice about that person's ability to use services like public transit, the bank, or the grocery store? Confusion, difficulty. No one wanted to help. Fear, yes. Yep.
Embarrassment.
Yes. And how could you tell that she was experiencing that fear or embarrassment?
Her breathing.
Yes, yes, her breathing. She was making some kind of noises of despair as she was out and about. And what reactions from others did she encounter?
Negative.
Very negative. Yes, very much in a hurry. Mhm. Many times people will point out the bus driver. You know, he's on a schedule, he's got to get to his next stop, so he says, go to the back, go to the back. But public transportation is for everybody. You know, they do have an obligation to be accessible and serve everybody. And what do you think could have been done to support this person or improve their experience?
Having someone with her.
Having someone with her?
What was that answer?
Do you mind repeating your answer? The fear that she wouldn't remember where she lived. And you'll notice how throughout the video, it sort of cuts from one scene to the next. So she'll be at her door, and then you kind of cut to the grocery store. But what happened in that in between? That's demonstrating that change in short-term memory, or that impairment of short-term memory. What other symptoms did you notice in that video? Yes, so she put the milk away in the cupboard. Tea in the fridge. What else do we notice?
She was looking for chicken cheese.
Yes. So she was experiencing difficulties with language. So she was trying to communicate about her list. Where is the chicken? Where is the cheese? But it came out as chicken cheese. And the person was sort of taken aback. So they didn't realize this person may be experiencing a challenge related to dementia. Instead, they just said, oh, you know, whatever.
It did seem like she was well dressed to be honest.
It seemed like she was or wasn't?
Wasn't.
Yes. What else? She had slippers on. How about at the bank? Couldn't remember her PIN.
Her house was carving.
So performing that familiar task, she had some difficulties with that. And when she tried to interact with the staff member at the bank, she as well was having some difficulties with her language there. So we can see how challenging it is navigating our community if we may be living with dementia. But we have to think back to the image of those brains and have compassion, because their brain is working as hard as it possibly can, and it may have experienced some atrophy. There may be some changes that have caused it to shrink, or maybe there's, some enlarged ventricles. So you really have to think, their brain is working really hard and it's making them breathe, and their heart is pumping blood, and they're walking around, and they know they have to go to the grocery store. They might be having some challenges. They know that they want to go to the bank, and they've been courageous enough to use public transit. And that's someone's right. We want to create those dementia-friendly communities that can help support someone to live well and continue to be a part of their community. So let's say, going to church has been an important part of someone's life and their family life and their identity. We want to be able to empower them to continue to do that so that they can live well and feel, a part of themselves despite having changes that are going on in their life. So we're going to watch a part 2 of the video where some changes have happened, and she has a much more positive experience. And one of the takeaways I hope that you take from this video is that sometimes I can experience this as well, but we think, okay, how can I make these huge changes? I want to really help someone. What can I do? But it's in the day-to-day small interactions that you can make a huge difference. Many times someone living with dementia is kind of experiencing reality moment to moment or hour to hour. So if you can make that one moment or that one interaction positive, or support them during that one moment, you are making a difference. So don't put too much pressure on yourself of, okay, how can I, change their life and help them out? It's just having the mindset of having patience, compassion, and empathy, and engaging with them in that moment to make that moment the best and easiest moment for them possible. So we'll play the video. We've already addressed these. And we'll go on to the next.
People with dementia have experiences like this every day. A little bit of understanding, tolerance and patience can make all the difference.
I'll tell you what, if you go into the seats just there, when we get there, I'll call you, okay?
Okay, madam.
I can't get on. Oh, thank you.
Let me help you. This way.
Thank you.
Can I look at that list?
Yes.
The chicken and cheese.
Oh,
Let's go this way.
thank you. Find out how to become dementia friendly. Contact Alzheimer's Society today.
So it's a much more palatable experience, and it directly relates to the level of patience people in her community had for her. And in some cases, it was a very kind of simple interaction, but instead of just brushing her off, just acknowledging her and identifying, okay, how can I assist here, made all the difference. So at this point in our presentation, we've discussed what dementia is, some common signs and symptoms to help you recognize that somebody may be living with dementia. But you might be wondering, how can I effectively communicate with someone living with dementia? So fear not, because I'm going to address some communication tips for you over the next few slides. And we're going to chat about what to do in the case that someone's reality is different from our here and now reality. How do we interact with someone? So again, we want to switch our thinking from these huge interventions to small changes that we can do that can very much have a large impact on our communication interaction. So something as simple as reducing distractions. So let's say you're at church, and I know that people sometimes like to chit-chat afterwards. You got to catch up and hear about how everyone's doing. But, let's say you want to chat with someone who might be living with dementia. Try to move them into an area that's a bit quieter. Maybe into the overflow room or, another one of the rooms where there's less people. If there's lots of noise or lots of lights, that can be a little bit distracting. So we want to set ourselves up for success in our interaction. We want to make eye contact with the person living with dementia. And we want to be very mindful of our body language. So someone living with dementia, as it progresses, they may move away from more verbal forms of communication and use non-verbal forms of communication. So it's very important to be mindful of our body language, our tone of voice. So we want to speak slowly and clearly with a pleasant tone of voice. And I always sort of giggle at this point in the presentation because it's a nice reminder to me as I'm presenting to speak slowly and clearly with a pleasant tone of voice. So hopefully I've been doing that. You want to allow someone to respond. Give them time to process what you have said to them and to respond. Another tip is that if you have said a sentence to someone living with dementia and you've given them some time to process and you want to repeat yourself, you want to repeat using the exact same phrasing. Because if you rephrase, then their processing has to start all over again. So you want to use the exact same phrasing. Another tip is to use closed-ended questions as opposed to open-ended questions. So let's say I wanted to find out how everyone's temperature is tonight. Instead of saying, how's your temperature? Are you all feeling comfortable? Because who knows what answer I'm going to hear. I could say, how are you doing tonight? Are you feeling hot or are you feeling cold? And that way, they just have to choose between two options instead of, a variety of options that comes with an open-ended question. You also want to use short, simple sentences. So you getting your point or your statement across in the most concise, simple way. We already kind of chatted about staying away from sarcasm and idioms and things like that. Now, what to do if somebody living with dementia, let's say you're chatting with someone and they start to bring up someone who's passed away. What do we do at that point? Well, to that I say we connect and we don't correct. And this is a new skill, so it's not always comfortable for everyone. But it's never too late to learn a new skill. So we want to actually support their reality. Because if we think back to the images of the brain, and we think back to how hard the brain is working to get up in the morning and go out and engage with one's community, if we start to question the reality that they believe is their reality, is that going to distress the person or is it going to calm the person? Distress. I know that if I was going about my day experiencing my reality, but perhaps I know, something's not right, I feel disoriented, but I don't really know kind of what's going on, and someone were to question my reality, I would be very distressed at that. And if it's not hurting them to enter their world and support their reality, it may be actually very helpful to de-escalate any anxiety that they're having. So to that, we often talk about a strategy called validate and redirect. So, someone is waiting for their daughter to come pick them up, but their daughter lives in Ottawa and is not coming to pick them up today. We don't have to ignore what they've said. We could say, oh, okay, you're waiting for your daughter. I was waiting for my daughter the other day at the grocery store as well. And then I looked outside and it was really snowing, and we sort of just redirect the conversation. You can also do a little Nancy Drewing as well and try to figure out what emotion may be driving what they've said. So maybe they're feeling lonely or isolated, they want companionship, or they're craving a feeling of stability and normalcy. So we can validate those feelings and sort of gently try to sway the conversation. But we do want to enter their world and support their reality. So with all of our interactions, we're trying to de-escalate any distress or confusion or anxiety. We want to always be making the person feel calm and comfortable. Does anyone have any questions about that concept?
What about the concept of, where am I going with this? Of saying, in relation to somebody being dead, who they think is still alive, would it be advantageous to just pretend you didn't know and go along with it?
So go along with,
Well, I didn't know so-and-so had died. When did that happen?
so if they're saying that someone has passed away that's still alive,
No, the other way around. Somebody's dead,
yes.
and they think they're alive.
So I would say you want to even just go along with exactly what they're saying. So if they think the person's alive, then you support that reality. Because if you say, I didn't know they had died, it's going to be as if they're hearing that news for the first time because they have, impairments of their memory. So, if every single day or every week you're having to remind them of something, it's going to hurt every single time. So, and sometimes people say, I don't want to lie. I promise my spouse I'd never lie. And I do understand that, and you know what, there's no right or wrong. It's a care partner's journey. But sometimes I like to ease people's apprehensions about that by saying, it's not a lie, it's a therapeutic truth. Yes. So if you are leading with kindness, that can help guide your interactions. But I do understand the complexities of a relationship, especially one that's, been present for half of your life or almost your whole life. There are complexities around, I said I would never lie, but you just have to think what is going to calm their anxiety or feeling of disorientation. What interaction is leading with kindness here? And that may be that therapeutic truth. And again, these are all new skills. We're all kind of brought up and socialized with the same rules of communication. And a lot of the times, care partners have to learn a whole new skill set that includes therapeutic truths, includes being patient if someone is repeating questions. So it's new, so it takes time, and you have to be kind to yourself as well.
Understanding that it was that he wouldn't, it was that he couldn't.
It wasn't that he wouldn't, it was that he couldn't. Mm-hmm. Another common thing that I hear from people is thinking that somebody living with dementia may be in denial. They're in denial of their diagnosis, or they don't seem to see the changes that have gone on, and so that can really frustrate a care partner. But a symptom of dementia, it's a Latin word, agnosia. And actually, this is the perfect audience for this, but if someone is agnostic, what does that mean? If someone identifies as agnostic,
What does agnosticism mean?
they don't know. So if someone says they are agnostic, they don't know whether there's a God. So agnosia is a Latin word for they don't know that they don't know. They lack insight. So somebody living with dementia may be functioning, and their reality, they think everything is fine, but in reality they may have declining abilities, but because of the dementia, they may be unable to appreciate those declining abilities. So it can look as if they are in denial, but it's actually a symptom of dementia. So it's very interesting when someone's becoming a care partner for the first time, because they have to learn all of these different nuances and all of these different ways of communicating with someone and relating with someone. So lastly, I like to chat about other ways to support members of your community who might be living with dementia or cognitive changes. So something that you can do, and actually check, because being here tonight, you have done that, learn about dementia. Learn what you can about dementia and try to practice some communication strategies. So, you could go home and try to practice communicating in a very literal way. So trying not to use sarcasm or idioms, trying to have very concise conversations. Being a safe, non-judgmental listening ear for an individual. Something else I've learned in my current role is the power of being heard and the power of listening to someone. Oftentimes, it can be so healing just to have someone hear you or be able to vent to someone or be able to express difficult emotions. So never underestimate the power of just being that listening ear for someone. That can very much change someone's whole day and make them feel much better. So never underestimate that power that you have. You could actively participate in removing the stigma associated with dementia. So you may notice during my presentation today, I often use the phrase person living with dementia. So I never said the dementia patient or other terms like that, kind of more antiquated terms. And that's on purpose because I try to use non-stigmatized language. Because it's important to talk about someone living with dementia as a person first, and not just sort of they're a dementia patient, because that kind of negates all of their other qualities, and the fact that they've lived this long life. So I make an effort in my day-to-day life to reduce the stigma by using dementia-friendly language. And you can too, and there is also a resource outside on dementia-friendly language, so please feel free. And where possible, I'll get 1 second. Where possible, connect the individual to available supports. So, if you know of, I've heard of a support group, or I've had a connection with community care, let me give you the number. Or, this amazing person came in and did this wonderful talk and talked about the Alzheimer's Society and all the great things that they do. And I picked up her card. Here you go. Just connecting an individual with supports and being the support yourself is very powerful as well. So to conclude, we're going to watch a summary video, and this one is not quite so emotional, but it kind of covers what we've talked about today and the importance of creating a dementia-friendly community.
Did you know that more than 500,000 Canadians, like me, live with dementia? Or that 1 in 5 Canadians care for someone who lives with dementia? Like me, many people living with dementia still live in our communities after we are diagnosed. It isn't always easy though. Often we feel left out and worried about how we'll be treated by others. Sometimes people just don't understand what dementia is and how it affects the brain, or know what to do if we forget something or get confused. So they seem frustrated or dismissive, and sometimes the places we'd like to go are just more difficult to get around. I once got lost trying to find the washrooms in a restaurant because of the loud music, poor lighting, and confusing signs. But it doesn't have to be like this. Everyone in the community can play a part in helping people living with dementia feel welcome and in creating accessible and inclusive spaces for everybody to enjoy. When our communities are dementia-friendly, people living with dementia feel less worried about how they will be treated and more confident about going out. Have you ever thought about what it would be like to live with dementia in your community or workplace? Is your community supportive, inclusive, and accessible for people living with dementia? Is it dementia-friendly in ways that let people stay engaged in community life? Would you recognize the signs that someone may be living with dementia and be able to offer the right type of support? Would you be comfortable talking to someone if you knew they were living with dementia? Would you know how to respond if someone seemed confused or had trouble expressing themselves? Are the businesses, organizations, and public spaces in your community designed so people can use them independently without getting disoriented, lost, or experiencing stigma because they are living with dementia? People living with dementia shouldn't have to work harder than everyone else to stay a part of the community. Wouldn't it be great if the neighborhoods and communities that we all share were dementia-friendly? Together with the Alzheimer's Society and community members like you, let's keep challenging the stereotypes and building a dementia-friendly Canada where everyone feels welcomed and supported. Take the first step and visit alzheimer.ca/dementia-friendly-Canada to learn more about Dementia-Friendly Canada. You'll find lots of information, education, and resources to help you and your organization become more dementia-friendly members of your community.
Next slide, please. So we're almost nearing the end here, but I wanted to talk a little bit about the Alzheimer's Society, and if you're thinking you might want to get in touch with us, we'd be happy to chat with you. Our services are very low barrier, so there's no cost to accessing our services, and you don't need a diagnosis. So we support care partners, we support people living with dementia, but there's no official diagnosis required to access our services either. So if you're interested in connecting with us and getting some supports from us, this is actually my colleague and friend, Casey, up on the screen here, and she's our intake coordinator. So if you were to call our office, you would chat with Casey, and she will listen to what's going on, chat about our programs and services, and kind of connect you with the appropriate programs that we offer. And there's a couple ways to get in touch. You could give us a call, and I do have Casey's business cards outside, so please feel free to grab one. You're welcome to email us. And we also accept professional referrals. So let's say you have a doctor's appointment tomorrow, you can ask them to refer, but you're more than welcome to self-refer as well. And my information is up here on the screen, and I have my business cards as well. If you're wanting to ask me a question or, chat, I love mail of any kind. So I always will answer my emails, and if I'm not the right person to answer your question, I can connect you with the right person, but my inbox is always open, so you're welcome to contact me as well. A couple things before the next couple slides. I'll do a little bit of a Q&A, and then I think we have some treats and coffee. So please feel free to ask your questions, and I'm going to hang around after if you want to ask me something not in front of everyone. That's totally fine too. And I also have with me a survey because our programs are funded partially by the Government of Ontario. So I have to sometimes collect surveys when I go out in the community to to be able to show that we're doing what we said we're doing, and we're always working to improve. So I have paper copies, and I'm going to have them laid out in our room with the coffee and tea. So if you feel like you want to complete a survey, I would very much appreciate that, and I'll collect them at the end. But you're under no obligation, but if you feel like you'd like to, you're welcome to as well. And I also want to thank you for taking the time out of your day to come and listen to my presentation today. I hope that you feel comfortable and that you might have learned something new about how to support members of your community who might be living with dementia. And I feel like you're well on your way to creating a dementia-friendly community right here. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you, and I very much appreciate it. And thank you to Chris for inviting me as well. Questions? Yes.
How would you respond to a person who thinks that you are someone different?
So the question was, how would you respond to someone who thinks you are someone different? So it depends on the context. If it's just a quick interaction, and it's sort of inconsequential, then you could support their reality and kind of go with it. But if you feel like it might, if they're thinking that you are a stranger, but you're actually there to assist, bringing them to an appointment or something like that, it might require a little bit more nuance. And a lot of these communication tips, you have to trial and error, and it can change person to person. So it's helpful if you know the person better, because then you know kind of what they're going to respond to. But I would say if it's a short interaction, inconsequential, then go with it. But if they're sort of becoming distressed because they think you're someone else, you want to do everything to de-escalate. So it's basically trial and error. What do I do here that's going to either escalate the anxiety or de-escalate? So I don't have really a black and white answer for you.
Okay, the question is prompted by a real life event.
Mm-hmm.
My wife's mother was in a nursing home, and she had either Alzheimer's or dementia. When we would go to visit, she would consider my wife and myself 50 years younger as being her mom and dad.
Mm-hmm.
And we didn't know how to respond to that.
Yes. In that case, that might be one of the times where you just support that reality. And you don't have to act like her mom and dad, so you don't have to sort of take on a new persona, but just acknowledging, okay, that's what she's thinking, and then we can sort of redirect the conversation elsewhere. And that's why I say it's a new skill, because it feels different, because that's not how we were all socialized to communicate. So it can feel a bit odd. But yeah, you don't have to put on a persona, but just, that's what she's thinking right now. So if that's going to, if supporting her reality is going to make her feel comfortable, then okay. And then we'll just kind of redirect. We might look at a photo album, or we might, if she enjoys knitting, then we'll chat about knitting, and we kind of redirect away.
I think with my mom, she was losing names.
Mm-hmm.
So anyone who was a man in the village was mom and dad.
Mm.
Those are the names that she could remember, even though she really knew we weren't her mom and dad. So
Yes.
her reality was still there, but the names were different.
So that might have been the symptom being difficulties with language. So recalling the names, or being able to, call people by different names. So then you say mom and dad when that's not the case. So sometimes you don't know whether it's, okay, is it the cognition, or are they having aphasia or difficulties with language? Any other questions?
I got one more.
All right.
You read in the media nowadays, as recently as today, somebody lost their life savings of $600,000 to a con artist. Are people with dementia dementia more likely to be conned than the average person?
So the question was, are people living with dementia more likely to be conned than the average person? And I only have my anecdotal answer. So my Talia answer, I don't have a statistic to refer to, but people living with dementia are a vulnerable population to scams and things like that because their ability to use reasoning, logic, and judgment. So, let's say I get a call, I want a free cruise. I know, okay, this is seeming like a scam. I'm using my reasoning and my logic and judgment. But if that has become impaired and they are interpreting something very literally, they are more apt to getting scammed, yes. So it can be a risk, as well as making risky financial decisions and things like that. Whereas normally, you're very conservative with your money and you never lend your money, but because of the changes going on in your brain, you may be more apt to being a little bit more risky financially. So they are a vulnerable population for scams.
Just curious, I see so much of it going on, it's becoming scary.
Anyone else? I will also accept compliments and insults.
Well, I'll give you a compliment then.
Okay.
You got a quarter?
I can't say that I do.
I come from a background where I spent 5 years in the communication center, and I have taken several courses on communications. You have added to it tonight, and I appreciate that.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate that as well. I'm glad that you came. I'm glad that everyone came tonight. Yeah.
Well, for me, it's not a question, it's more like a contribution. First of all, I'll say thank you for the presentation. It was eye-opening and educating. For me, I'm all about learning new knowledge and skills to create a more inclusive and supportive environment for individuals who are differently able. So I would like to say that the organization or your community or whatever should do more to sensitize everyone, like through schools and churches, the workplace, so they know and have the knowledge and skills to be able to relate with these people. Because sometimes, like from the video we watched, the bus driver and others may not have known they were ignorant. So if they had gotten lectures, presentations like this from their workplaces or schools or wherever, I think that they would have done better.
Thank you very much. I agree with you. I think it is important to educate, especially public organizations and groups who are serving people, just people in general, because they will encounter people living with dementia. I did a presentation at an accounting firm because, for example, in the financial industry, sometimes it can be succession planning, wills and estates, and that sort of thing. So they are interacting with many senior citizens, and they're interacting with people living with dementia. So it's important to educate themselves on, okay, how do I provide the best customer service for someone living with dementia, and how do I ensure that I'm ethically serving them if there's changes in their capacity. So I think there is a place really in every industry for learning about how to support people living with dementia. So I really appreciate that comment. Thank you. Anyone else, or are we all getting excited for the cookies? All right, well, thank you so much. And like I said, I'll be hanging around, so feel free to come say hi, or if you have a question, I'm happy to chat with you afterwards as well. You're welcome.
And I have a little gift for Talia, and I want to thank you for offering a new language and the grace of the moment. That's what stuck with me, the little moments. And you have graced us with your presence here tonight. And we have a wonderful prayer shawl ministry